No fighter in this modern era has reached a level of both fame and performance that can be compared to the UFC's lightweight king, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Though seemingly retired from the sport, this unbeaten Dagestani destroyer has managed to earn himself an aura of invincibility through his dominant efforts over the years. And while it does seem as though 29-0 is too uneven a record to retire on, it's hard to know if we'll ever see the Eagle return to the octagon ever again. With that in mind, we're going to take a look at Khabib's case for GOAT status and see how it matches up against some of his competitors within that field. So, what is it exactly that makes people consider Khabib as the GOAT? Well, for starters, his resume stands as perhaps the single best of his era, a perfect, unblemished 29 wins that has seen him take the scalps of lightweight division standards such as Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje, Rafael dos Anjos, Edson Barbosa, and Al Iaquinta. And while these names are certainly impressive additions to his record, above all other things, it's the manner in which Khabib has achieved what he has achieved that has set him apart. After just 13 fights in the UFC, one could assume that it may be a bit early to bring Khabib's name into the GOAT conversation. But as far as we're concerned, never before has the UFC octagon seen such a dominant force in terms of the actual technical expertise on display during these fights. Khabib's unbelievable mastery of the grappling arts has made his fights largely one-sided affairs, bouts that will make us all question when the Eagle would force the battle to the ground, not if. During his run through the sport's top flight, Khabib held an aura that could only be compared to the famed boxer Mike Tyson in his prime. Just as fans in the 1990s expected Iron Mike to land like it was an absolute given, modern MMA fans could all but guarantee Khabib's success with the takedown. Such was the depth of his skill set. And that, above all other things, is what makes this legendary lightweight champion so damn good. Though the tests became more and more difficult as his career went on, the results remained as consistent as one could ever imagine. Through his earliest matchups and the stunning performances he turned against Abel Trujillo, Thiago Tavares, and the future champion RDA, it was Khabib's consistency, above all other things, that has made his argument worthwhile. But what are some of the knocks on Nurmagomedov's GOAT claim when compared to some of the fighters who would challenge him to that title? Well, first, Khabib didn't exactly hang around. Fighters like Jon Jones, George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, and Demetrious Johnson all enjoyed long and drawn-out spells at the top of their divisions, defeating all rising contenders and adapting with the natural progression of the game. Though Khabib has reached heights that are arguably unique to him, with just 3 defenses of his lightweight belt, his record pales in comparison to those who would challenge him in this department. Now, of course, factors ranging from recurring injuries to the politics behind the belt as a result of Conor McGregor's 2-weight world championship ambitions hindered Khabib's progress. But even still, with defenses that number in the double digits for some of the names above, it's pretty easy to see why Khabib doesn't quite cut it in some people's eyes. However, we still believe that there is a very good argument to be made that Khabib is the single greatest example of a mixed martial arts fighter we have ever seen. Indeed, there have been fighters with a greater degree of longevity, but with that 3-fight streak that brought him to 29-0, in particular, Khabib fought pound for pound top 15 fighters and turned in the type of performances that come as close to perfect as one could ever hope for. Beating down the former champion Conor McGregor with a level of viciousness and aggression that made the Irishman look meek by comparison, nullifying the offensive prowess of the interim champ Dustin Poirier through a single-minded focus on Sambo dominance, keeping the chaos of Justin Gaethje at bay by making the levels that exist in this game crystal clear. In that short space of time, he managed to push the boundaries of mixed martial arts to an extent that has already been mimicked by his contemporaries. All of a sudden, that dominance from the top, the constant pressure, the infamous Dagestani handcuff, these were becoming the new standards for excellence within the sport. And just like Anderson Silva's precision striking and Jon Jones's look-see-do creativity, Khabib stands as this era's biggest driving force behind the overall progression of the game. But is that enough to warrant your nod in the GOAT conversation? Well, that depends on how you define the title of GOAT. If we're looking for longevity, activity, a willingness to compete across more than one weight class, then no, Khabib does fall some ways short in that discussion. One look at the overall trajectory of the former welterweight and middleweight king Georges St-Pierre will be enough to give him your vote in terms of the length of his career and the quality of opposition he took out. But even still, GSP's heights, though certainly great, didn't contain within them the same level of morale-sapping perfection that Khabib's did. They were comparable, yes, but all in all, Nurmagomedov looked like a different breed in there. For many people, an understanding of the cycle of this sport helps in their selection of GOAT candidates. All champions eventually encounter the type of setback that makes their approach look dated and limited. It's not an absolute given, but it is still part and parcel of the sport we love so much. Eventually, after years spent as champion, you begin fighting contenders that entered the sport wanting to beat you. Fighters who spent years upon years watching tape, learning from your successes, your shortcomings, and so on. When the time comes for these guys to eventually rise to the top, they enter the octagon with years of knowledge at their disposal, their skills sharpened and polished through a necessity for evolution that has come about as a result of your longtime status as champion. When John Jones ruled 205 pounds for the best part of a decade, fighting like Alexander Gustafsson and Dominic Reyes, they viewed their inevitable battle with the champion as their moment to bring about the natural progression of the sport. This sport is always evolving, and young rising talents all across the globe are learning because, to put it simply, they must. Through his decision to retire from the sport upon defeating his contemporaries, Khabib has taken control of his own fate, opting against proving himself against the next generation, in favor of an end that will see him take his aura of invincibility out of the sport with him. That's not a knock on Khabib, and it's not to say that he couldn't win another 10 fights, but in the GOAT conversation, it certainly knocks his achievements down a peg or two. But that's really the only criticism you can have of the Eagle at this point in time. It might sound harsh, but if you want to talk about MMA GOATs, the criteria is going to be as harsh as possible. To summarize, as far as we're concerned, Khabib is, without question, one of the best and most impressive fighters of all time. Performance for performance, there is also a very strong argument to be made for him as the single greatest example of an MMA fighter who has ever made the walk. But again, his longevity has seen him avoid the tests of time and the sport's evolution. It's not a critical flaw to his CV, but it certainly deserves to be mentioned. Whether he will fight again or not is anyone's guess, but either way, it has been nothing short of a privilege to watch this man touch greatness over the course of the last number of years.